Our first topic in the weekly news roundup is a bill so good it will never pass. I mean, this is the bill that we need to pass, but it will never pass. But we'll go ahead and chat about it anyway. And this actually, part of this has to do with the Supreme Court this week is actually hearing the arguments over the Geofence warrants. So this is actually a really good case to be watching. Now, I have a very big problem with this. This case is doomed to fail. And the reason it's doomed to fail is because they found a guy who's clearly guilty, and they're trying to use the Supreme Court to overturn Geofence warrants to get him off on a technicality. And I do not want to see a guilty guy go free on a technicality. It's one of these things. But on the flip side of the coin, and where the lawyers are arguing, is you wouldn't have gotten the evidence to find him actually guilty without it. But the problem is that early on in the phase of the investigation, after they started questioning him, he simply broke down and confessed to armed robbery of a bank. But his lawyer came in afterwards and said, well, you didn't even have business to talk to him because you used this Geofence warrant. So I would love it if the Supreme Court heard a case on Geofence warrants about an innocent person who was caught up. Somebody who was pestered by the police because they couldn't find any other lead, but this is the quintessential person who jogged by the bank every morning, and so the police thinks they're casing the place. All right, so I am very saddened by the case here because the Supreme Court is hearing whether or not the sprawling warrants for smartphone location data infringes on Americans' privacy rights and violate the Constitution. And in my opinion, it completely does. Okay, the government should not have any ability to go to any source without a judicial warrant on any form of investigation of a person. And while the Geofence warrants are judicial warrants, technically they are judicial warrants that sweep up a whole lot of innocent people. So if you are unaware of what the Geofence warrant is, this is when some event happens, the police are shy on leads, and so they start probing the big tech companies to say, hey, who's within this area? Of course, this kind of starts and is popular with like Google or Apple, who has this information. Now, of course, with Google made some changes a few years ago that you would have to explicitly opt in to the location tracking inside of your Android device or Google-enabled device in order to capture this. But I was actually a couple years ago, I was watching some of the true crime stuff, and it was like, I don't know if it was 2020 or one of them like that. It was the first case I heard that they were actually using information from a car to put a person at the scene of a crime. And so not only is your Google account or your Apple account or your Microsoft account with that location services turned on now, not only can those be used against you, but now with the proliferation of automobiles, which collect all sorts of data, including very interestingly geolocation data, now your cars could be subpoenaed for the data. Now, the problem is that, and the reason I hate this case is because looking at this, this is Shatry versus United States. Originally brought, case was originally brought by Shatry, whose phone location data helped police in Richmond, Virginia, track him down after he robbed the bank at gunpoint and escaped with $195,000 in 2019. He pled guilty to armed robbery and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But his lawyers argue that none of the evidence against him should have ever been admissible to court. You see, I want to see the Geofence warrants tried in a case where an innocent person was harassed by the police because of a Geofence warrant. That is the type of case we want to see, because we don't have a guilty scumbag who's already confessed to the crime of putting people's life in danger by doing armed robbery at a bank. Go rot in your 12 years and add another 12 on top of it, you moron. May you never enter society again. All right. But they're choosing, of course, for whatever reason, to challenge this, which will pretty much mean that this case is going to be like the Supreme Court, like, okay, no, I think we'll just go ahead and let the scumbag be the scumbag in jail. I don't know. So, the lawyers, though, they say that the government says an individual has no reasonable expectation of privacy in movements that anyone could see that he has opted in to allow third party to analyze for its own purposes. Now, the problem with this is that many people do not know they have opted into it. You may have opted into it by clicking that check mark on a terms and conditions for an app that you've downloaded. For example, Gas Buddy, find your gas. It's just download the app. It's free. Why are you paying guys like, Matt Walsh, etc., $15,000 plus ad spots? And I made that number up. But they're paying him ad spots to read to his millions of people to download a free app because your data is being harvested and monetized. They're getting the sweet data based on that. And the more people that are convinced to download that for free, I got news for you guys. Without logging in anything, you can find the cheapest gas stations on your current location. All right. It is not that complicated. We've talked about that before. But the question here is, yes, there's an understanding that when you're in public, you don't have a specific right to privacy, but that's the same argument we see with flock cameras. Do we have the right to enter the world without being followed by every form of dystopian CEO? These psychopaths are like, you want the human race to endure, right? I don't know. Let me tell you, after I'm done with my next talk on the Antichrist. Yeah, that was Peter Thiel. Yes, he hesitated slightly too long on the question, should the human race endure, while giving lectures on the Antichrist from Rome. Straitjacket someone, please? Anyway, and so, yes, we don't necessarily have the right to privacy if we're walking down a public park, but does that mean we need to be tracked perpetually every time we leave the domicile of our house? Of course, we're even being tracked in there because if you got your smartphone in there and your smart TV in there and, God forbid, your smart toaster in there, it is also tracking a bunch of data inside of your domicile. So you are not even in a public place and this data is being used against you. Go figure. So law enforcement is increasingly demanding tech companies hand over sensitive phone location data on people at or near a site where a suspected crime occurred. And privacy advocates and some legal experts view geofence searches as a dragnet that sweeps up innocent bystanders. Just because you have a cell phone, should you be subjected to all sorts of law enforcement investigations because of crimes that may have happened in your vicinity? And that really is the crux of the question that is being asked with geofence warrants. So Chatry had turned on an optional Google location history feature that documented his location every few minutes. Okay, so, you might think about this. You've explicitly turned on the feature to track your location, and then you slip your Android phone in your pocket and you rob a bank. This is why I hate this case. This guy needs to go rot in his jail cell, okay? Go rot, dude. If nothing else, go be the president of Idiocracy. I'm going to turn on the tracking location on my device and slip it in my pocket and go rob a bank. I wonder if the phone cameras picked up what he was saying and offered him ads for ammunition. Because the data tracking is getting that insane. I hear you're robbing a bank. Would you like to try these new hollow points? Yeah. What is going on in our world, right? The U.S. government has argued in legal filings that Chatry chose to allow Google to collect and use his phone location data, and that investigators identified him through a warrant. And that really is the thing, that if he willingly goes in and sees, okay, I'm going to do this and allow this. Now, is that really how it happened? Or did he simply, quote unquote, allow it because he entered a checkbox on a random terms of service that popped up for some location or some app on his device? And that's what we don't know. And then the question is this the proper type of warrant? Because as we talked about before, a geofence warrant is open-ended. A real traditional judicial warrant, you have to go to the judge and say, we're targeting this person based on evidence X, Y, and Z. In the geofence warrant, they don't know who the person is. They don't have any information about the time and location of the crime. And so they say, tell us everybody who is in the vicinity of that particular time and location of the crime. And that really is the thing that we're looking at here. And so that does not really satisfy the spirit of seeking a warrant, although it is a warrant, and that's why we are at the Supreme Court asking, is this a legitimate warrant? So privacy advocates warn that the implications of this case go far beyond suspected criminals. If the government doesn't need to get a warrant or link something to a crime, it could monitor a protest or an abortion clinic or a gun range or a church or an AA meeting or a doctor's office. And this is absolutely true. The government could go in and know, okay, at St. Paul's Methodist Church, there's an AA meeting on Tuesday evening. Hey, Google, tell us everyone who was at, the Burger King on Tuesday evening. Of course, the Burger King is right next to the church, right? Well, you'll have all these people swept up in there, and you'll be able to have a record of everybody attending the AA meeting. And the question is what is the legitimate purpose of getting that particular warrant? I don't know. Send in some false flag, pay some thug a little bit of money to go in, do an armed robbery of Burger King so that you could get the data via a Geofence warrant. And okay, yeah, you found your guy, but you also have a list of all of the innocent people who are attending an anonymous meeting. And so that really is the fundamental problem of these types of warrants. So while this is actually going on, a new law is introduced. This is by Lauren Boebert and Thomas Massey. So this bill here is so good, it will never pass, and it should. And it has one of these fun, pithy names, the Surveillance Accountability Act. And unlike most other laws, this actually provides a little bit of the accountability. This is totally weird. I don't know. This is indeed totally weird. So introduces the Surveillance Accountability Act. The landmark legislation would require federal and local government agencies to obtain a warrant supported by probable cause for conducting surveillance on American citizens in accordance with the Fourth Amendment. Like, okay, here is a law that says you have to follow the law. This is how retarded our government system is. I mean, this makes about as much sense as needing to introduce a law about mutilating your children. Like, what? But we have to, apparently. So this is because of the surveillance technologies by government agencies, including facial recognitions, license plate reader systems like Flock, and commercially purchased location data, Geofence data, and other things. In fact, the Geofence data, hey, at least there's a rubber stamp of a warrant there. Oh no, the way they're doing it, they're just going to a company saying, hey, you have a bunch of location data? We'll buy it. And for some reason, they're saying, oh, that's not a violation of the Fourth Amendment because you have agreed to give that information up to any purpose. Kind of crazy, eh? Kind of crazy. So for years, the federal government has treated the Fourth Amendment like a suggestion. They build a massive surveillance machine that tracks, scans, and spies on law-abiding Americans without a warrant, without probable cause, and without any accountability. That's what they say. All right, so what would this act do? And this is why this bill is so good it will never pass. It will require all government-initiated searches and surveillance activities to be supported by a judicially issued warrant based on probable cause. That's ridiculous. You can't possibly get a warrant based on probable cause in order to engage in surveillance technology. What do we do with all the data in these Flock cameras? Yeah. Okay, prohibits warrantless facial recognition scanning by federal and local law enforcement agencies in public spaces, including at schools and places of worship. So, yeah, you can't go into public areas and just put up surveillance. We're just going to know who everybody is walking by. All right. So 3 is restrict the use of automated license plate readers like Flock cameras to create a persistent location database of citizens without a court order. Yes, banish Flock. Bankrupt Flock. Bankrupt Flock. Send the Flock flying south for the winter. Ban federal agencies from purchasing commercially available location data or movement data to circumvent warrant requirements. Yeah, this is such common sense. Prohibit federal pressure on local law enforcement agencies to share warrantlessly collected surveillance data. Yes. See, this bill has 5 points. They're all great. This is the type of stuff we need. But because of how good this bill actually is, this thing is never going to pass. This bill is dead in the water because the government is never going to give up an opportunity it has to collect any information on people. That's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts about all that in the comments down below.